The dust of FOB Arabus tasted like grit and regret. It coated everything in a fine, khaki-colored film: the modular barracks, the razor-wire fences, the faces of the young soldiers who watched Sergeant Anya Petrova step off the transport helicopter. She moved with an economy of motion that spoke of long years in uniform, but it was a quietness they mistook for frailty. Her hair, pulled back in a severe bun, was streaked with silver. Her face was a roadmap of faint scars and sun-etched lines around eyes the color of a winter sky. She carried a long, canvas-wrapped case. It was old, faded, and patched in several places. Corporal Diaz, leader of the Scout Sniper platoon and barely 25, nudged the soldier next to him, Private Chun. "Get a load of Grandma's luggage," Diaz murmured, a smirk playing on his lips. "Think she brought knitting needles in there?" His team snickered. They were all young, sculpted by modern fitness regimens and equipped with the latest generation of modular sniper systems. Their rifles were matte black, festooned with integrated ballistics computers, carbon fiber bipods, and scopes the size of small telescopes. Anya's case looked like a relic from a museum. She ignored them, her gaze sweeping the perimeter. The outpost was a lonely tooth of civilization jabbed into a vast, unforgiving desert. Wind-scoured mountains clawed at the horizon. It was a place where distance was a weapon and the wind was a constant, whispering enemy. Her quarters were a sterile, coffin-sized room. She unzipped the canvas case. Inside, nestled in worn foam, lay a rifle. It was a bolt-action chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, but it was a custom build, decades old. The wooden stock was dark with age and linseed oil, worn smooth in the places her hands and cheek had rested for thousands of hours. The steel of the barrel and action had a deep, burnished patina, not the flat black of modern coatings. It was a tool, not a gadget. Later, in the mess hall, the dismissal was more direct. Colonel Marcus Thorne, the FOB's commander, reviewed her file on a tablet as she stood before his desk. Thorne was a man who believed in systems, data, and next-generation warfare. He saw soldiers as interoperable assets. Anya, with her paper file and archaic-looking rifle, did not compute. "Sergeant Petrova," he said, his voice clipped and devoid of warmth. "Your record is extensive," he didn't say impressive. He said it like a man describing a long, tedious book. "Most of it is redacted. You've been out of a line unit for 5 years. Desk job at command, I see. Why are you here?" "I was reassigned, sir," Anya said, her voice calm and even. "I didn't request a senior NCO with a gap in their field record. I requested a marksman proficient with the M2010 system and the BORS ballistics computer. My men are running a high-speed, data-driven Overwatch program. This isn't a retirement post." His eyes flicked to the window, where Diaz and his team were jogging in perfect formation. "This is the tip of the spear." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Thorne leaned forward. "We have a saying here, Sergeant. 1 shot, 1 kill is obsolete. We're about systemic denial. We use data to own the battle space before the first round is ever fired. Can you contribute to that? Or are you just here to collect a pension?" The question hung in the air, thick with condescension. Anya's expression didn't change. "I can contribute, Colonel." Good. Thorne stood, a clear dismissal. "Corporal Diaz is your platoon leader. He'll get you squared away. See to it your equipment is up to spec. I won't have any weak links in my chain." The meeting with Diaz was worse. He'd assembled his team in the platoon's ready room, a space that smelled of cleaning solvent and youthful arrogance. They lounged on weapon cases, their state-of-the-art rifles displayed like trophies. Anya entered and stood by the door. Diaz sauntered over, circling her slowly. "The colonel says you're with us now. Name's Diaz. This is my team," he gestured vaguely at the others. "We run a tight ship here, Sergeant. We qualify quarterly on the LDSAT range. That's long distance, smart acquisition and targeting. Fully automated. It tracks your metrics: time to engagement, cold bore deviation, follow-up shot cadence. Your whole life story in data points." He stopped in front of her. "What's that thing you're carrying?" "My rifle," Anya said. Yeah, I got that. What is it? Looks like something my great-grandpappy would have used to hunt deer. One of the younger snipers, a kid named Rourke, laughed. Careful, Diaz. It might be a collector's item. Anya remained silent. Her stillness was a stark contrast to their restless energy. Look, Diaz said, his tone shifting from mockery to command. Thorn wants you integrated. That means you need to be on our level. First things first, we need to inspect your gear. Make sure it meets baseline requirements. He held out his hand. Let's see it. Anya hesitated for a fraction of a second, a flicker in her otherwise placid demeanor. The rifle was an extension of her. Handing it over felt like baring her soul. But it was an order, however thinly veiled. She unzipped the case and carefully lifted the weapon out. Diaz took it, his hands clumsy and disrespectful. He held it up. God, it must weigh a ton. What's with the wood? You afraid of plastic? He worked the bolt, which moved with the slick, silent precision of perfectly mated steel. The sound was swallowed by the room's ambient hum. He handed it off to Rourke, who fumbled it. The rifle, top-heavy with its large scope, tilted in his grasp. Diaz, in a feigned attempt to help, slapped Rourke's arm. Careful with the museum piece, Butterfingers. The slap was just hard enough. Rourke lost his grip. Time seemed to slow. Anya's eyes widened, her hand shooting out, but she was too far away. The rifle fell. It didn't clatter. It landed with a sickening, solid thud on the concrete floor. The sound was obscene in the quiet room. It hit directly on the scope's elevation turret. Silence descended. Even Diaz's smirk faltered for a moment. Anya knelt, her movements deliberate. She picked up the rifle. There was a deep gouge in the polished wood of the stock, a spiderweb of fine cracks radiating from the impact point near the pistol grip. Worse, she could see a distinct, unnatural angle to the scope. The mount, a custom-milled piece of steel she'd had for 20 years, was bent. Her zero was gone. The rifle was, for all practical purposes, useless. Diaz cleared his throat, recovering his swagger. Whoops. Looks like it's not as tough as it looks, he shrugged. Guess you'll have to requisition a new one. An M2010, maybe. Join the 21st century. Anya looked from the cracked stock to the bent scope mount. She looked at Diaz's feigned innocence and the nervous flicker in Rourke's eyes. She saw the truth of it. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. You don't belong here. She stood, cradling her broken rifle. Her face was a mask of calm, but her eyes held a cold, hard light. She didn't say a word. She simply turned and walked out of the room, the silence she left behind more damning than any accusation. Colonel Thorne was unsympathetic. He barely looked up from his tablet when she reported the damage. An accident during a gear inspection, you say? He sighed, a sound of pure administrative annoyance. Well, that's unfortunate. The armorers on this FOB are vehicle specialists, not gunsmiths. We can put in a requisition for a new scope and stock, but it'll have to come in on the next supply bird. Could be 2-3 weeks. Sir, I can repair it, Anya stated. Thorne finally looked at her, his expression a mixture of pity and disbelief. Sergeant, that is a precision instrument. Or it was. The scope mount is bent. The stock is compromised. You can't just slap some glue on it and call it a day. The harmonics will be shot. It'll never hold a true 0-inch. I can fix it, Colonel. No, his voice was final. You're off the duty roster until your equipment is replaced and you've qualified on it. I can't have you in an Overwatch position with a compromised weapon. It's a liability. Find something to do in the meantime. Supervise mess hall cleanup. Inventory supplies. Stay out of the way. He dismissed her with a wave of his hand, already turning back to his screen. She was benched, humiliated, sidelined by a commander who saw a problem instead of a soldier, and by a subordinate who saw a target for his own insecurity. That night, as the perpetual wind howled outside, Anya did not go to her bunk. She carried her broken rifle not to the armory, but to the vehicle maintenance bay. It was a cavernous space, smelling of diesel, ozone, and hot metal. A lone mechanic, a grizzled master sergeant named Elias, was working late on a stubborn generator. He glanced up as she entered, his eyes taking in the woman and the damaged weapon. "Help you, Sergeant?" he asked, wiping his hands on an already blackened rag. "I need a workbench," Anya said. "And a vise." Elias grunted, gesturing with his chin toward a clear corner. "Knock yourself out. Just don't break anything I can't fix." She nodded her thanks and laid the rifle on the steel workbench under the harsh glare of an overhead fluorescent light. The damage looked even worse up close. The fine cracks in the stock were like broken veins. The scope was canted at a sickening 3-degree angle. Anyone else would have declared it a total loss. Anya began to work. Her movements were a study in focused patience. First, she carefully removed the scope, her fingers gentle on the rings. She set it aside, protected in a soft cloth. Then, she unseated the barreled action from the stock. The two came apart with a soft click. The heart of the rifle was now separate from its broken shell. She spent the first hour just examining the stock. Her fingertips traced the cracks, feeling their depth, their direction. She saw how the impact had traveled through the dense walnut, a shockwave frozen in wood. From a discarded comms unit, she stripped a small sheet of carbon fiber mesh. From a medical kit, she procured a 2-part industrial epoxy. She meticulously cleaned the cracks with a dental pick and compressed air, ensuring the bonding agent would have a pure surface. As she worked, mechanics and drivers on the night shift would wander past. They saw a middle-aged woman, her face set in deep concentration, fussing over a piece of broken wood. They saw a hobbyist, a tinkerer. They didn't see the surgeon. She mixed the epoxy, the acrid smell cutting through the grease and oil of the bay. With a fine brush, she worked the resin deep into the fissures, her touch impossibly delicate. Then she laid the carbon fiber mesh over the damaged area, impregnating it with more epoxy until it was a single, solid patch. She wrapped the area tightly with electrical tape, applying even pressure to force the resin into every microscopic void. The stock was set aside to cure, a patient in intensive care. Now for the true challenge, the bent scope mount. It was a single piece of machined steel heat-treated for strength. Bending it back without compromising its integrity was next to impossible. Elias, the mechanic, wandered over, drawn by the quiet intensity of her labor. "That's a bad one," he said, peering at the bent metal. "Gonna have microfractures in it for sure. You try to bend that cold, it'll snap." "I know," Anya said, not looking up. "You'd need to heat it," Elias continued, thinking aloud. "Get it to a dull cherry red. But you don't have a temperature-controlled forge. A blowtorch will cook the temper right out of it. It'll be soft as butter when it cools." Anya finally looked at him. "Do you have a blowtorch? Acetylene?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, and a quench bucket full of used motor oil. But like I said, you'll ruin the temper." "Give me the torch," she said, "and a piece of flat, heavy scrap steel, about an inch thick." Intrigued, Elias complied. He watched as she clamped the bent mount into the massive bench vise. She took the heavy plate of scrap steel and laid it across the top of the mount, a brace to distribute the force. She ignited the torch, the hiss roar of the flame filling the bay. She didn't apply the flame directly to the bend. Instead, she heated the thick plate of scrap steel above it. Her eyes, narrowed against the blue-white flame, were fixed on the color of the metal. She was using the scrap plate as a heat sink, a radiator, allowing the temperature to transfer into the mount slowly, evenly. It was a technique of immense skill, learned in a place and time she never spoke of. The steel of the mount began to glow, a faint blush that deepened to a dull, angry cherry, the exact color Elias had mentioned. Exactly. At that precise moment, she shut off the torch. She picked up a heavy ball-peen hammer. She didn't strike the mount itself. She delivered a series of sharp, measured blows to the heated plate above it. Tang, tang, tang. The sound was sharp, musical. With each strike, the bent steel of the mount relaxed, easing back toward its original shape under the steady, indirect pressure. It wasn't brute force. It was a conversation with the metal. She used a machinist's square to check her progress, her movements unhurried. After a dozen blows, she stopped. The mount was perfectly, flawlessly straight. Before it could cool in the open air, she plunged it into the bucket of filthy motor oil. The quench produced a violent hiss and a plume of foul-smelling smoke. This was the most critical part. Quenching in oil, not water, would cool the steel at a specific rate, helping to restore some of its hardness. It wouldn't be perfect, but she knew it would be strong enough. Elias stared, his mouth slightly agape. "I'll be damned," he whispered. "You just retempered hardened steel with a blowtorch and a bucket of sludge." Anya pulled the mount from the oil, now coated in black grime. She didn't smile. She didn't acknowledge his awe. She just began the methodical process of cleaning it. By 0400, the epoxy on the stock had cured. The carbon fiber patch was as hard as stone, an ugly but functional scar on the beautiful wood. She carefully sanded it smooth, her hands working with the same tireless precision. She reseated the action, torquing the bolts to a specific, memorized value. She remounted the scope, using a simple bubble level and a plumb line she'd hung from a ceiling girder to ensure it was perfectly aligned with the bore. The rifle was whole again, scarred but whole. As the first hints of dawn bled across the eastern mountains, she cleaned her tools and wiped down the workbench, leaving it cleaner than she'd found it. Elias watched her go, a newfound respect in his eyes. She hadn't just fixed a rifle. She had resurrected it. She didn't go to the barracks. She went straight to the long-distance range. Not the fancy digital one, but the old one, marked with steel plates at known distances out to 2,000 meters. The wind was already picking up, a fickle, shifting current that snaked through the canyons. She needed to re-zero. The cold-bore shot, the first shot from a clean, cool barrel, is the truest test. It is the only shot that matters in a real-world scenario. She lay prone, the patched rifle feeling solid and familiar against her shoulder. She chambered a round. Her breathing slowed until it was almost imperceptible. She took aim at a steel plate at 500 meters. She accounted for the bent mount, the patched stock, the unknown variables. She held her aim 2 mils high and 1 mil left, a calculated guess based on pure instinct. She squeezed the trigger. The recoil was a familiar push. The crack of the shot echoed across the desert. A second later, a faint ping returned. A hit, but it was low and to the right of the bullseye. She hadn't been guessing. She had been asking a question. The rifle had answered. She made her adjustments, her fingers turning the turrets of the scope with microscopic clicks. Another shot. Closer. Another adjustment. The third shot. Dead center. The rifle was zeroed. It had taken her 3 shots and less than 5 minutes. It was then that Colonel Thorne's jeep pulled up, kicking up a cloud of dust. Diaz was in the passenger seat, his expression smug. They had likely been alerted by the range control tower. "Sergeant Petrova," Thorne called out, his voice sharp with irritation. "What in the hell do you think you're doing? I gave you a direct order. You are off the duty roster." Anya slowly got to her feet, turning to face him. "I was verifying my equipment is operational, sir." "Operational?" Diaz scoffed, hopping out of the jeep. He gestured at the rifle. "You put some tape on it? That thing's a piece of junk. You're probably 5 feet off target at this range." "I'm zeroed, Corporal," Anya said quietly. Thorne's face was turning red. His authority had been challenged. "This is insubordination, Sergeant. I'm half tempted to have you confined to quarters." It was at that moment that a voice crackled over the base-wide comms system. "All Overwatch qualified personnel, report to the LDSAT range for the quarterly qualification course. Drill commences in 30 minutes. An idea, cruel and political, formed in Thorne's mind. A way to publicly crush this defiance. He looked from Anya to the advanced digital range, 100 meters away, where Diaz's team was already starting to gather. "You think your rifle is operational?" Thorne said, his voice dangerously low. "Fine. Prove it. You're running the qualification course. Right now." Diaz's smirk widened. This was better than he could have hoped. A public humiliation. The LDSAT course was a monster. 100 reactive targets, popping up at random distances from 300 to 2,000 meters. Some were static, some moved, some were partially obscured. It tested speed, target identification, and shooting under pressure. The base record, held by Diaz, was 85 hits. Most experienced shooters were lucky to break 70. For a shooter with a cobbled-together rifle she just re-zeroed, success would be hitting 20. "Sir, is that wise?" Diaz asked, feigning concern. "She could have a catastrophic failure. It's a safety risk." "She says it's operational," Thorne snapped. "Let's see it operate. The course is yours, Sergeant. Let's see what you've got." Word spread like wildfire. The old-timer with the broken rifle forced to qualify on the high-tech range by the colonel himself. A small crowd gathered at a safe distance. Off-duty soldiers, mechanics, admin clerks. Private Chun was there, his expression anxious. Elias, the master sergeant from the motor pool, stood at the back, his arms crossed. Anya said nothing. She simply picked up her rifle and a box of ammunition and walked toward the firing point for the LDSAT range. She lay down in the designated lane, the ground hard and unforgiving. She set up her bipod. The patch stock felt solid against her cheek. She chambered a round. The range officer's voice boomed from the speakers. "Shooter ready." Anya took a deep breath, held it, and let half of it out. She gave a short, sharp nod. "Stand by." A green light flashed. Immediately a target popped up. A steel silhouette at 450 meters. Before the crowd could even register it, the crack of her rifle split the air. A fraction of a second later, the target snapped down. Hit. Score 1. Another target. 720 meters. Crack. It vanished. Hit. Score 2. A moving target traversing left to right at 600 meters. She led it perfectly. Crack. Gone. Hit. Score 3. She worked with a terrifying metronomic rhythm. There was no wasted motion. Her left hand adjusted the rear bag for elevation. Her right hand worked the bolt in a fluid, practiced motion. Up, back, forward, down. Ejecting a spent casing and chambering a fresh round before the rifle had even fully settled from the recoil. Crack. Hit. Score 10. Crack. Hit. Score 11. The initial snickers from Diaz's cronies had died. They watched, their mouths slightly ajar. She wasn't using a ballistic computer. She wasn't checking a wind meter. She was reading the mirage, the faint shimmer of heat rising from the desert floor, watching the way it bent the light. She was feeling the wind on her face, a skill that no sensor could replicate. At 25 hits, the crowd was utterly silent. Diaz's face was a mask of disbelief. He was watching a ghost. The targets were coming faster now, designed to overwhelm. 2 at once. A shoot, no-shoot sequence with a civilian silhouette. She engaged the valid target and held fire on the other, her judgment instantaneous. Crack. Hit. Score 34. Crack. Hit. Score 35. Colonel Thorne stood behind the firing line, watching through a pair of high-powered binoculars. His knuckles were white where he gripped them. He was no longer watching an act of insubordination. He was watching a master at work. The wind began to gust, a notoriously difficult condition. The flags on the range whipped back and forth. A target appeared at 1,100 meters, the wind pushing hard from the right. Diaz leaned over to Rourke. "No way, that's a 3 mil hold. She can't dope that in time." Anya didn't seem to hesitate. She held her reticle far to the right of the target, seemingly aiming at empty air. She squeezed the trigger. For a long second, nothing happened. The bullet, fighting the wind, seemed to hang in the air. Then the target snapped down. Hit. Score 56. A low gasp went through the crowd. Private Chen's eyes were wide with awe. This wasn't marksmanship. It was sorcery. The barrel of her rifle was shimmering with heat now, affecting the sight picture. Her shoulder, absorbing the repeated, brutal recoil of the .338 Lapua. Had to be a massive bruising. But her rhythm didn't falter. Crack, hit, score, 70. Crack, hit, score, 71. She was in a trance, a state of pure focus. The world had shrunk to the crosshairs, her breathing, and the trigger. The patch stock was solid. The repaired mount was true. The rifle, an extension of her will, performed its function with brutal efficiency. A target at 1,500 meters. Pinprick in the distance. Crack. A long pause, then the flash of the hit indicator light. Hit. Score. 84. One more and she would tie Diaz's record. The next target was a trick. It appeared for only 3 seconds, partially obscured by a simulated barricade at 950 meters. A shot that required instant calculation and a perfect snapshot. Crack. Hit. Score. 85. She had tied the record. A murmur spread through the onlookers. Diaz was pale, his arrogance stripped away, replaced by a raw, naked shock. He had set that record with a $10,000 rifle system, on a calm day, after 3 practice runs. She was doing it with a broken gun in a gale on her first try. She didn't stop. Crack. Hit. Score. 86. She had broken the record. Crack. Hit. Score. 87. The numbers climbed, each one a hammer blow to the established order of the FOB. 90. 91. The shots were becoming more difficult, the distances more extreme. A target at 1,800 meters. Another at 1950, almost at the range's limit. She hit them both. Crack. Hit. Score. 95. Crack. Hit. Score. 96. Crack. Hit. Score. 97. The heat from the barrel was now so intense that the mirage it created made the target swim in her scope. She had to wait, letting her breathing slow, timing her shot between heartbeats to get a clear picture. Crack. Hit. Score. 98. One more. A single target appeared at 1,300 meters. It was a standard silhouette, but the wind was a roaring, unpredictable torrent. Crack. Hit. Score. 99. The range fell silent. The score of 99 glowed on the monitor. It was a number that shouldn't be possible. 99 consecutive hits under escalating pressure. Everyone waited for the final target. The 100th. Seconds ticked by. The green light on the console stayed lit, indicating the course was still active. But no target appeared. The range officer's voice came over the speaker, tinged with confusion. Stand-by shooter. We have a malfunction on target array 100. The mechanism is jammed. The machine had broken before she did. Anya didn't move for a long moment. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she cleared her rifle, placed it on safe, and stood up. She hadn't smiled. She hadn't looked at the scoreboard. The job was done. The point was made. She began to pack her gear as if she had simply finished a routine practice session. The silence of the crowd was absolute. It was a silence of shock, of awe, and of profound, undeniable respect. Back in his office, Colonel Thorne stared at the digital score report. 99/100. Target 100, range malfunction. Time to engagement average, 47 seconds. Accuracy in wind, 100%. The data was irrefutable. It was impossible. His hands shaking slightly, he pulled up Anya Petrova's file again. He focused on the redactions, the long black lines that hid 2 decades of her life. On a hunch, he accessed a secure command channel, one he rarely used. He placed a call to CENTCOM headquarters, to a general whose name was spoken in hushed tones. General, this is Colonel Thorne at FOB Arabus. I'm calling about a Sergeant Anya Petrova. She was recently assigned to my command. The line was silent for a moment. Then the general's gruff voice came through, laced with something Thorne couldn't identify. Amusement? Disbelief? Petrova? Anya Petrova is with you? What about her? Sir, her file is heavily redacted. I was just seeking clarification on her role. The general let out a short, harsh laugh. Clarification? Son, if Anya Petrova is at your FOB, you don't ask her for clarification. You ask her what she needs. You have Baba Yaga on your base, and you're calling me about her file. Thorne felt a cold dread wash over him. Baba Yaga, the witch, the boogeyman from Slavic folklore. It was a call sign he'd only heard whispered, a legend from the shadowy corners of the special operations world from a decade ago. A sniper who operated alone, deep behind enemy lines, a ghost who dismantled entire command structures with a single ancient rifle. A figure who was supposed to be a myth, a story told to frighten new recruits. You put her on mess duty, didn't you? The general asked, his voice now laced with acid. Or worse. Colonel, listen to me very carefully. That woman is a living legend. She wrote the book on long-range marksmanship that your hotshot kids are barely able to read. Her last field assignment was 5 years ago because she spent 18 months in a hospital after taking 3 rounds to get her team out of an ambush. The desk job wasn't a demotion. It was the only way command could get her to stop deploying. The only reason she's with you now is because she pulled every string she had to get back in the field. Do not. The general's voice dropped to a deadly serious whisper. Underestimate her again. Is that clear? Yes, General, Thorne said, his own voice barely a croak. He hung up the phone, the name echoing in his mind. Baba Yaga. He looked out the window at the dusty range, where the woman in question was now walking back toward the barracks, her scarred rifle slung over her shoulder. He had dismissed a legend. He had tried to break a myth. That evening, Anya was in the workshop, cleaning her rifle. She didn't go to the mess hall. She didn't need to. A tray of food, the best the kitchen had to offer, had been silently left for her by the door. The bay door slid open. Corporal Diaz stood there, silhouetted against the fading light. He wasn't smirking. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, unsettling humility. He held something in his hand. He walked to her workbench, not meeting her eyes. He placed a bottle of premium military-grade bore solvent on the bench next to her cleaning kit. It was the expensive German stuff he was known to hoard for his own rifle. The wind, he said, his voice rough. At 1,100 meters. How did you? He couldn't finish the question. Anya dipped a patch in her own worn bottle of standard-issue solvent and began running it through the barrel. She didn't look at him. The Mirage was running right to left, but the dust at ground level was kicking left to right. There was a shear. You aim for the seam between them. Diaz stared at her, processing the information. It was a level of observation he couldn't even comprehend. He nodded slowly, a single sharp dip of his chin. He didn't apologize for the rifle, for the mockery. The offering of the solvent was his apology. It was the only language they both truly understood. He turned and left without another word. A few minutes later, Private Chun appeared at the door, looking nervous. He clutched a small data pad. Sergeant, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I was wondering, if you have a moment, could you explain Coriolis drift to me? The books just talk about the math, but they don't explain how to feel it. Anya stopped her cleaning. She looked at the young soldier, at his genuine, hungry desire to learn. She saw the future of her craft. She gestured with her chin to an empty crate beside her workbench. Sit down, Private. The next morning, a new duty roster was posted. The Scout Sniper Platoon had a new entry at the top. Platoon Lead Instructor, SGT, A. Petrova. Colonel Thorne had made the change himself. Beneath it, a new training directive was issued, effective immediately. All platoon marksmen will undergo supplementary training in analog marksmanship, wind reading, and fieldcraft. Instructor, Sergeant Petrova. The data-driven methodology of FOB Arabus had just been given a soul of iron and wood. That night, Anya was not in the workshop. She was on watch in her preferred environment. She lay in a sniper hide she'd constructed herself on a high ridge overlooking the FOB's most vulnerable sector. The position was invisible, a scorpion's nest woven into the rock and shadow. Her rifle lay beside her, clean and ready. The ugly carbon fiber patch on the stock was rough under her glove. A reminder. A scar. A story. It was more beautiful to her now than the unblemished would had ever been. The wind whispered through the rocks, a familiar song. She watched the moon rise, bathing the desolate landscape in a pale, ethereal light. She was alone. She was calm. She was exactly where she belonged. The sun would rise in a few hours, casting a long shadow from the mountain. Anya Petrova, Baba Yaga, would be there to meet it, a silent, immovable guardian, her vigil unbroken. The respect she had commanded was as silent and profound as the desert itself, earned not with words, but with 100 clicks of a turret and 99 perfect shots. She closed her eyes not to sleep, but to listen to the language of the night, a language she understood better than any other.